If you were hosting a television show, what lengths would you go to keep ratings up? You could interview some amazing guests in a safe and controlled environment. Or you could put lives in danger, exploit horrors from the past, and risk unleashing a terrible force on humanity. It's all about what we're willing to sacrifice in order to make it to the top. So let's see if we can survive the forces of evil, as well as the entertainment business itself. That is, if you don't consider those two things one in the same already, as we learn how to beat Late Night with the Devil. Our story begins with an Exposition news broadcast explaining how a man named Jack Delroy started hosting a late-night talk show in the 1970s. Between the music, interviews, and sketch comedy, his show, Night Owls, quickly rose in popularity, helping Americans forget about their troubles for a bit throughout the week. After 5 years of running the successful, although not #1, talk show, his wife Madeline suddenly became ill with a terminal disease and passed away. As if that wasn't bad enough, the ratings have begun to plummet, right as Jack's contract is nearing its expiration. Everything is now riding on Sweeps Week, which is starting on Halloween night, where Jack has a desperate plan to hopefully boost ratings up to the #1 spot. The film from here on out is supposed to be what was recorded that fateful night, known as Late Night with the Devil, a catchy name and intriguing concept for Halloween. However, will it be enough to save this man's career? Well, I'm sure his job will be the least of his worries once his life's on the line, but that's not until later. For now, let's just see how the show goes. It starts off basic enough with some spooky-themed hijinks and lighthearted banter between the host and his stage sidekick, Gus, the usual talk show routine. Eventually, though, he calls out the first guest of the night, a psychic medium by the name of Christo, who is able to tap into the frequency of the dead. At least that's what he claims, but as the man begins to demonstrate his power to the audience, it unfortunately appears to be nothing more than the standard ruse of cold reading and pre-show eavesdropping to make him look legit. That is, until his act is supposed to be finished, when something suddenly goes horribly wrong. The camera feed itself flickers as Christo is overtaken by an intense signal, causing him immense pain. The spirit communicating claims to be named Minnie, and screams with sadness to talk to her widowed loved one, but no one in the studio admits to recognizing the name. The signal increases in strength as the man's eyes roll back in his head and lights blow around the stage, until all at once it's over, with the spirit having moved on. Guess his powers are the real deal, at least to some degree. Christo is visibly shaken by this, appearing traumatized and weakened by the event, yet he begrudgingly agrees to stay on the set to see the night through. What a trooper. Jack now calls out the next guest of the evening, Carmichael, an ex-magician who uses his knowledge of the craft to attempt to debunk occult phenomena. This isn't because he's a skeptic, but more so to weed out the fakes in order to hopefully find the real deal. So much so that he even offers $100,000 to anyone who can provide evidence of the supernatural. Well, he might be parting with that money tonight with the skills Christo has. Of course, Carr doubts the credibility of his performance, understandably. After all, it started off very fake. But that final reading did seem very real, and as we can see from the man's coughing fit and current physical state, it clearly unsettled him in a drastic way. That's not enough to convince the former magician, however, and after enough of his insulting remarks of doubt, Christo is offended enough to splash water in his face and storm off stage. Jack stops him before he fully departs, however, claiming he still needs to talk to him about that final reading because he believes it was actually for him. Apparently, Minnie was the private nickname he had for his wife, who of course departed recently and left him a widower. Before Christo can discuss the matter further, however, he starts to collapse from exhaustion, before spewing a black goo all over the place. Gross, but clearly something's not right, so they cut to commercial as they rush the man to a hospital. During the break, Carr explains to the host that he believes Christo knew of the secret nickname to Jack's wife simply because he was told before the program in order to boost ratings with an impressive performance. As for that tar that was spat up, a simple vaudeville trick any magician could do. I mean, those are possibilities, I suppose, but something tells me that part of his act wasn't actually an act. Regardless, it's making for great television according to the ratings that are already in, so on with the show. Before the next guest is brought on, Jack plays a tape for the audience and viewers at home to give them some background information for context. There was a group of demon worshippers that formed a church, where they specifically praised a demon named Abraxas, who demanded sacrifice because of course he did. Because of this, they had some of their female members breed children for the sole purpose of being that sacrifice. Dark stuff. Authorities eventually shut the demonic church down for their practices, leading to a fire that burned the place and everyone inside it to ash. That is, all but a single 10-year-old child lined up for sacrifice, who somehow managed to survive the inferno. As you can imagine, the young girl, Lily, has a disturbed mental state from the experience of being raised amongst the zealots, and as such, they have a special doctor to take care of her. That being Dr. June Ross Mitchell, who we learn is a parapsychologist, someone who studies subjects that traditional science is typically ill-equipped to handle. And both this doctor as well as her patient are the next guest Jack brings out for the show. They seem normal enough as they first enter, but the young lass Lily soon starts acting suspiciously weird, always knowing exactly which camera is the one actively broadcasting and staring directly and intently into it. Yeah, that may be a bit odd, but maybe a light is just showing what camera is in use, and she simply doesn't have much experience to know how to act on screen. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt for now. One person who doesn't give her that benefit, though, is the doctor, who shares her concerns with Jack during the next commercial break about this not being a good idea, as Lily has been becoming more unpredictable during their sessions lately. This is nothing but good news to the desperate host, however, as he believes that spontaneous nature will make for great television. Which is true, I suppose, in the same way that a car crash makes for a more interesting stock car race, since people tend to love the spectacle of a disaster. On that note, let's look over all the decisions so far. Christo's act was fairly mundane, but that ending shouldn't have gone ignored. His reactions seemed too genuine to fake, but even if they weren't legitimate, the camera feed messing up as the lights around the stage literally explode are a bit too much to just be a coincidence. That, combined with the name given being tied to Jack's recently departed wife, should have been a sign of its authenticity, assuming he's telling the truth and not just trying to make for a more interesting show. So with all this, we should have stopped the program right there for safety, both his and ours, or at least have investigated the situation more thoroughly with the medium in order to see why our deceased loved one was so desperately trying to get our attention. Considering the state of the show, we would probably do the latter for ratings, but either way, we should have taken this sign more seriously. The spirit could have been trying to warn of things to come, but even if we don't care about the potential messages from beyond, we should still care about the well-being of the guest on our show. Krista was clearly affected by this incident and should have been given a vital checkup the moment after it occurred, instead of waiting until he's unnaturally spilling his guts. As we will soon find out, the man actually passed away during his trip to the hospital from massive hemorrhaging, having blood pour from all of his orifices. This could have been prevented if he was treated sooner, and given us a sign that these forces are possibly very real and not to be toyed with. Speaking of not toying with, we shouldn't be using a young girl who has been through such a horrible ordeal for her entire life as a stage prop for our ratings. We should listen to and trust the doctor's opinion, as she should know her patient's well-being the best, and not have Lily on air to have to reveal her trauma or perform any sort of spectacle in order to raise a view count. I know Jack's desperate for ratings, but there should be a limit somewhere. Besides just being immoral, it's also highly dangerous for Lily and the other people in the studio. We don't know exactly how she will react, and could end up hurting someone or herself with a violent reaction. And while it's also not fair to just assume a patient with a traumatic past poses a threat to those around them, we do have to err on the side of caution and can't rule it out as a possibility. So even if we do get the permission of both the young girl and Dr. June, we should have precautions in place, such as supervised staff constantly around the patient to restrain her if needed, and keeping any and all potentially harmful or hazardous props she could use as a weapon away from her. As we'll soon see, they do the exact opposite, displaying a sacrificial dagger from the church on the coffee table right in front of her. An unnecessary risk with even a more older and stable guest, let alone a 13-year-old one raised by demon worshippers. The show continues despite the tragic news of Christo's passing and the possible warning sign that presents itself as. Jack interviews Dr. June and we learn that she believes Lily is suffering from a psychic infestation, or in layman's terms, a demonic possession. This, of course, is met with some pushback from the other guest, Carmichael, but as June points out, unexplored areas of science are always met with resistance. However, the open-minded are the ones that make new discoveries and expand our knowledge of how the world works. A valid argument. Jack now turns the interview to Lily, who states she calls a demon inside her Mr. Wiggles, due to the way it wiggles its way in and out of her head at times. This comment is suddenly punctuated by Gus's theremin on stage, only it doesn't stop, and continues to increase in frequency as the camera feed acts up once again. The sidekick isn't even able to touch the instrument without getting zapped by electricity coming off of it, as the high-pitched sound waves it's putting out cause the glasses on the table to explode. Eventually, Carmichael takes matters into his own hands and just rips the power cord out. That could have been dangerous to attempt, but glad it worked. Car, of course, explains this as simple technical difficulties, but Lily is quick to interject that Mr. Wiggles was at fault. This gives Jack the idea to interview said demon, and Lily is excited at the prospect. June tries to talk her out of it, but with the host, audience, and young girl all begging to give it a try, she reluctantly agrees. Carmichael even increases his offer of proving the supernatural to the pair, claiming he will write them a check for $500,000 if they succeed. Before they talk to this devil, however, they first have a word with their sponsors as they get everything prepared during the commercial break. During this time, Gus voices his concerns to Jack about how several members of the crew are scared of the events from this night, and some are even jumping ship on the failing show. He begs the host to please stop before things get out of hand, but does show his loyalty, or need for a paycheck at least, by not abandoning Jack himself when the host claims he intends to go on with the show. As they go back on air, we see Dr. June and Lily sitting center stage, with the young girl strapped down to hers. June explains for everyone to remain calm throughout the process, and begins to talk to Lily with some hypnotherapy, leading to her falling into a deep sleep. She reawakens soon after, but with a very deep voice and jittery spasm-like movements as she has become overtaken by Mr. Wiggles. The demon naturally mocks those around her, pointing out that it remembers Jack from The Tall Trees, and is even aware that the host and Dr. June are seeing each other on the side. After enough cursing and insulting from the creature, June goes to intervene, and we see the transformation is more than just surface level, as the child's face morphs into that of a beast in an attempt to bite the woman. This is finally enough for the doctor to put a stop to things, as she pulls out an amulet and recites an incantation to return Lily to normal, but not before the power surges throughout the place, and the girl's chair levitates a good distance from the floor. However, it's finally over, and June comforts the girl as they cut to commercial once again. Well, Carmichael should have that check ready for them at least, right? Well, not quite, as even this display isn't enough to convince him, and he's prepared to explain why after the break. During which, Jack has to help free Lily as her strap is stuck. He does so by using that sacrificial dagger displayed earlier. Well, at least that thing came in handy. Afterwards, he receives the bad news of several scared employees walking out on set due to this event, but also the good news of how fans and sponsors are loving the show, claiming it as the biggest event in television history since the moon landing. So of course, with greed in his eyes between these two pieces of information, Jack is just focusing on how much of a hit this evening has truly been. He even wants June and Lily to become recurring guests, communicating with the demon every week. Sure, turn a little girl's trauma into entertainment for the masses and poke at a demonic entity causing supernatural happenings. Nothing can go wrong with that idea there. So now the show's on the air once again, and it's the former magician's turn to prove the event just witnessed was faked. He explains it away as hypnosis and stagecraft, and will demonstrate this himself, using Gus as a reluctant volunteer. After sitting the man in a chair, Carmichael takes out a pocket watch and does some sleight of hand to make it display a spinning spiral, which he instructs Gus and all the viewers in the audience and at home to pay attention to. He soon puts it away, followed by asking Gus about his fear of worms. This seemingly innocent question soon leads the man to feeling uncomfortable, being hot and itchy, and squirming in his chair before feeling something on his neck. To Gus's horror, he pulls worms out from under his skin, leading to him tearing his body open to reveal a whole swarm of the creatures, as a giant wormy dearly burst from his skull. This isn't just him seeing things either. as everyone in the crew and audience witnessed a terrifying sight as well. But eventually, Carmichael puts an end to the illusion and brings everyone back to reality. Carr explains that what he just did was mass hypnosis, causing everyone there to witness what he wanted them to see, and that this is how Dr. June and Lily accomplished their demon summoning ritual. Jack, in disbelief, proposes the idea of them rewatching the footage from what just occurred. If it was just a trick, the tapes should display what was really happening in reality, and Carmichael agrees. Sure enough, the playback confirms Carr was orchestrating the entire ordeal, causing virtually everyone there to see worms where there were none. Lily wants to prove that their segment was real though, and not just an act, so she proposes they play back the tapes for their part of the show too. June doesn't think that's a good idea, however, but Jack can't resist and even postpones the final act of the program to rewatch the footage. During the playback, Jack happens to notice something in a single frame of the recording and has his crew pause it to reveal the spirit of his deceased wife standing beside him in the video. This is a surreal and bittersweet moment for the host, but it only encourages Carmichael to be even more in disbelief of the act, claiming Jack must have been in on the performance and doctored the tapes. That is a plausible theory, but it doesn't really matter in the end, as Mr. Wiggles shows themselves once again. The entity absorbs power from around the studio to the point that Lily's head is open from it. Gus tries his best to perform an impromptu exorcism, but gets his neck spun 180 degrees for his troubles. Hey, at least he tried. Dr. June now takes a crack at it with her amulet, but doesn't fare much better than Gus did, as she's pulled into the air by her necklace and left to hang there until her throat opens. Carmichael is a firm believer in the supernatural now and quickly takes back any doubts he had about Lily and her demon as he pledges allegiance to the dark entity, even offering it the check he wrote. It's too little too late, however, as he is immolated on the spot with a simple turn of the being's head. Jack manages to escape with other members of the crew and audience as the demon turns towards the camera and causes it to turn to static. Talk about some technical difficulties. This seems like it would be the end of the story, but there's still a bit more left for Jack as he starts going through a strange acid trip-like journey of flashbacks to moments throughout his career. He seems aware of the events that just happened and confused as to how or why he keeps skipping throughout time. He eventually lands on a specific night, however, where he made a deal with a cult-like group of members at a club established in the 1800s, known simply as the Grove. They have apparently helped politicians and entertainers throughout history in unknown and mysterious ways. And while we don't get a clear explanation of exactly what or how they assisted Jack here, it's heavily implied they're responsible for boosting his career. But what did they get in return for this? Well, as Jack's next vision implies, this is why his wife suddenly turned very ill and passed away. If it wasn't made obvious by now, this is also why the demon, Mr. Wiggles, recognized Jack from the tall trees, as apparently they made the deal with this creature in return for its power. If I had to guess, I'm pretty sure this Grove Club is affiliated, if not the exact same members of, the Church of Abraxas. As Jack reflects on his mistakes and actions, the memory version of his wife on her deathbed begs to be put out of her misery, giving him the sacrificial dagger to use on her. This act takes the man out of his dream state, however, where he's shoving the blade into Lily's body instead, back in the studio on Halloween night. In shock and disbelief, he continues to try and snap out of it, but is stuck in this nightmare known simply as reality. So what really happened? It's hard to say. On the one hand, Lily's face is intact, and there is no evidence she was a demonic lightning entity, so one could assume Jack simply was delusional and murdered her. However, that doesn't explain why his sidekick and guests are still dead in bizarre and inhuman ways. Don't think a simple delusion would cause Gus's head to spin or Carmichael to turn to ash. Guess the only way to know for sure would be to rewatch the tapes from that night. As for us, we can rewatch events as well to see if there was anything different we could have done. Well, Jack probably should have put a stop to the show the moment he saw the demonic possession even had a hint of credibility. As if the exploding lights from earlier weren't enough, there was also the theremin that refused to turn off or tone down. Even if these weren't caused by a demonic presence, they'd be evidence enough of a power shortage problem and cause for alarm to stop filming. But after what they witnessed, with a young girl needing to be strapped down, physically altering her body, and floating in the air, clearly they are not equipped to deal with what's going on. Best case scenario, it is just an act. It still has to be traumatizing for a 13-year-old to go through or be exploited in this manner. Worst case scenario, it's the real deal, in which case I don't think a demon would appreciate being displayed as a freak show like this. In either case, we need to take Gus's advice and stop this now before anyone gets hurt. But greed's gotta greed, and Jack's not going to want to lose ratings by postponing this performance, even though logically it's better to lose viewers than it is to lose life. Speaking of losing life, Lily may not have lost hers if Jack didn't have access to that dagger in the first place. It was already a pretty dumb and dangerous idea to bring an actual weapon on set, but it's even more dumb to leave it within reach of someone who is a child, mentally disturbed, and if you're superstitious, potentially possessed. Jack does this by accident since he forgot he was holding it after freeing the young girl, but he should have been responsible and taken the time to have it removed properly. Had he done so, he might not have had it during the visions he was seeing at the end there and may not have been able to end the child's life. As for Carmichael's act of mass hypnosis, it seems he should give himself that check for $100 grand, as that's an impressive display of supernatural power all on its own. It's difficult enough to hypnotize a single person who is willing, let alone an entire studio audience all at once, and unknowingly. Seriously, that was the most unbelievable act in the entire film. When it comes to Lily and her demon, there wasn't really much anyone could have done. Incantations and amulets proved useless, and its powers were pretty vague and extreme. True, it was taken down with a simple dagger, and maybe that dagger held special properties. But more likely it was just getting its vessel slain to make Jack out to be a murderer. You know, standard demon trickery. I guess the lesson here is to not mess with unknown forces, and to keep an open mind about them potentially being real. If Jack had done so, he might not have ever made a deal with a cult in the first place, resulting in the end of his wife and career. Always err on the side of caution when it comes to the unknown. And with that said, thanks for watching as always, my friends. Take care and binge another one.